We are privileged to have an exceptional panel of speakers with us today. They are Carol Christine Fair, Carolina Chimoy, Imtiaz Gul, Naveen Murshid, Christoph Zalewski. The session will be moderated by Gregory Simons. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished guests to the stage. Thank you.
This is on. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so we will begin this plenary session, Wars Without Ends, How Conflicts Outlive Ceasefires. So hopefully I can try and shake you out of any kind of food coma by attempting to play my traditional devil's advocate role and to keep a relatively interactive play in this session. So what we will do to begin with, we've got 5 excellent speakers with diverse backgrounds and knowledge, etc., who will give different perspectives. So we're going to go through a couple of rounds. The first round, which every speaker will have 4 to 5 minutes to address a provocative question which I pose. And once that is over, that we will go into an interactive discussion based on the previous round, and then we'll throw it open to Q&A. So, okay, when we're talking about wars without ends, of course, wars are conceived as having an end, but if we look in the last years, we have things like endless wars and global war on terrorism, these kinds of things. Now we've shifted from those kind of conflicts to others which are more state-centric, and we've got Ukraine, we've got Gaza, we've got different conflicts appearing in different places. And we have, in the middle of this notion of an evolving geopolitical order. And I mean, if we look at how these are conceived historically, you have these ideas that when there is a hegemon, there is peace. And if we look at these in the past, we have the representations like Pax Romana, Pax Britannica, and now perhaps the final hurrah of Pax Americana. And one of the things that needs to be asked when we're talking about peace, whose peace exactly? Because while the imperial centre may have some notion of peace and stability, there are others that have to pay the price for that peace and stability. And when we also look at this, and this is something which we hopefully can bring out in this session, that you have a physical, a kinetic war, but alongside it you have a non-kinetic information war. Because wars, if we look at it, battles are won on the field militarily, but wars themselves, that is a collection of battles, are eventually won politically. So, and if we're looking at that, we can see a number of things happening now. For example, how Ukraine conflict is seen in Europe or in the global north as opposed to the global south, and vice versa, how the global south sees things like the Gaza genocide, or how the global north represents and interprets that same thing. So we get different perspectives of the same thing, which are driven by interests and ambitions. So that is enough from me. So I will ask a question to a named speaker, and they will have 4 to 5 minutes to address that, and we'll go to the next speaker so we can move this around and get a good dynamic going. So I would like to ask Christine. Now, I mean, you have interesting times in the United States at the moment. And if we look at it, I mean, one can see that in terms of geostrategic imperatives, these remain the same. The ways of achieving them have changed. But you have a president who is interesting, if we're to put it diplomatically. And on the one hand, he tries to present himself as a peace president. And this is something he tried to pursue in his election. I will end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. Yet, and I mean, he even, campaigned for the Nobel Peace Prize. And on the other hand, he is creating wars, like enabling and complicit in the genocide in Gaza, but also threatening other countries like Venezuela, like Nigeria. So what can we make of this? I mean, in terms of, what do you predict? How will this end in terms of the theme of this panel? Is this going to be an intensification of conflict in the physical world, or is this going to be something which is going to perhaps be an information war?
So I'm a South Asianist, so that means my work focuses on Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So I'm going to confine my answer to the regions of the world that I actually know the most about, not the other conflicts that you mentioned. What I actually think is interesting is that there have been some conflicts that have decisively ended. The Tamil insurgency in Sri Lanka decisively ended. The Khalistan insurgency in India decisively ended. But there are a lot of other conflicts in South Asia that are ongoing. So, for example, the Maoist insurgency in India, though it is today waning, it has a history of coming back. India's northeast insurgencies, they wax and they wane. The ongoing insurgency, Pakistan-backed in Kashmir, that's ongoing. In Pakistan's own war against the Pakistani Taliban. So I think while you're right that some of these conflicts don't seem to have an end, there are precedents in this region of conflicts actually ending. I'm not sure that that's the answer you're looking for, but it's the answer that I can give you based upon my bases of expertise.
Okay, thank you. So, Carolina, so you've been going to Ukraine and covering the conflict there for some time now. And you can perhaps see that there is quite a substantial difference in how people from the global south perceive and interpret the war in Ukraine, as opposed to the global north, which sees it in a completely different fashion. But at the same time, that's one level of issue. But when you look at another one, there is the issue how Western mainstream media have covered the war in Ukraine, because this has not remained constant, but has kind of evolved with geopolitical circumstances. Mm-hmm. So if we look at it, in the beginning, you had these predictions that Russia would lose the war, that Russia would be broken up, and that it would be Ukraine that is victorious. But now we're at a time when that has evolved into something else. I mean, could you go a little bit into, from your perspective, insider, how these different editorial lines evolve and change with politics and circumstances, please?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, it's important to say that the war started in 2014. The full-scale invasion is what happened in 2022, and back then in 2014, you are right, it was covered until a certain point. Then there were the Minsk agreements, and everything was fine. Life continued. Many countries needed to keep in touch with Russia due to energy and their economies. And then 2022, the full-scale invasion started, and it became a huge test for the West. That's how Europe sold it. That's how the United States also talked about it, a huge test for democracies, meaning Ukraine is fighting not only for their own political system and what they believe in, their rights, but also for all our rights and our political systems. And that's when this war became global, and that is also when the difference stood up between the global south, how they see this war. Most of the countries say it's not our war. We don't have to get involved in a war that it's not ours. Then the double standards come in. And you are right, in a certain sense also the media and the editorial line went with that. I think also social media plays a big factor in this. Because nowadays, I mean, if you compare it to 2014 when the war started and to 2022, nowadays everyone has a phone, everyone was showing the pictures from 2022 when the Russians got not only into the Donbas region, but even intended to go into Kyiv, and everyone was posting the pictures of the attacks. That's something that it's still happening now, when you see civilians posting pictures of drones that fall into schools or hospitals, meaning they're targeting civilians as well. That has a completely different impact than what we were seeing, the pictures we were seeing in 2014. So yeah, I think that is pretty much my perspective on the war since 2014.
Thank you. So, some different perspectives as we see on an environment which is constantly evolving in terms of realities, which is a multiple, but also the politics of those particular things. So if we, Imtiaz, now you're from Pakistan,
Yep.
and it's not been so boring there recently with the increased tensions, border tensions with India, and you have Donald Trump, who's claiming that he brought peace to the conflict earlier in the year. I mean, as Pakistan is in the middle of this hotspot, I mean, you've got India, China, Iran, the United States, you've got all of these rather large powers. How does Pakistan intend to navigate those particular pitfalls, especially you've not only got external conflicts on your border, you've got internal conflicts within your borders. So how are these to be somehow navigated? What is your prediction for the future? Because if we look at some of these conflicts, especially the external ones, they come at very, should we say, specific geopolitical moments. And so far, there's probably no accident or coincidence in the nature and the timing that these things break out. So how does Pakistan assert its interests and its sovereignty, its integrity in this hotspot?
Okay. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much first to CGS for organizing such a grand event and allowing people to discuss the evolving global order into disorder. And then I think it couldn't have been there couldn't have been a better occasion for us from Pakistan to discuss and share with the audiences abroad as to what does it mean to be caught between various conflicting interests. So we are surrounded by India. On the other hand, to the west, is Afghanistan still in turmoil. Then Iran, which is under global Western sanctions. And then, of course, with China. It's the best friend in the world, I would say. We call it, although it's a very old cliche, but it's called higher than Himalayas and deeper than the oceans friendship. It has evolved into a much more than what we call the friendship, because you can have friends, but then lasting partnerships, I think, are very difficult to forge, and this is what Pakistan and China have managed. And as for navigating this difficult situation that you're dealing with a president in Washington who is taking up the advice by his security establishment extremely seriously when they say that China is an ascendant threat, ascendant challenge to the interests of the United States. And then you have a very close partner of the United States, part of the Quad, that is India, which itself is also sees itself as a competition to China. So now to deal with that situation, I think is extremely difficult when we saw how this dislike of China or pro-China sentiment also translated into removal of the government in Pakistan back in April 2022. And I think Epstein files have also made it very clear very recently that a few emails that that were quoted by a drop site, they also said that the arrival of Imran Khan, or the victory of Imran Khan in June 2018 was not welcomed by many in the United States, by people like Jeffrey Epstein himself, who considered him as an anti-peace, as a very dangerous man, as somebody who may be pandering to the Islamist radicals. So we have seen, how this external influence has played out on Pakistan, and for long, Pakistan, as long as Imran Khan was the president, the prime minister, was dealing with Washington, which was indifferent. President Biden's administration, I think, basically didn't deal at all with Prime Minister Imran Khan's administration. But the moment he was removed and we started this brush with the so-called hybrid regime, I think that things went better. And then probably it was a God-sent opportunity for Pakistan when the Indians lobbed missiles into Pakistan on the so-called terrorist camps, and then the Indians got the reply. So this impressed, I think, the world altogether. And I've been hearing this. I've been traveling to Europe, to America, to China. So almost everybody knew what happened in the 4 days of brief conflict between May 7 and May 10, and how even President Trump then kept repeating that how many, like 5 to 7 aircraft down by the Pakistani Air Force. So Indians, had nowhere to go. And this was where I think Pakistan basically was able to regain the place it had lost in White House, in Washington. And I think ever since Pakistan, regardless of the merits or demerits of the policy that Pakistan has adopted, but I was reading the Bloomberg news yesterday, and it also says that the Operation Sindoor by India in May 2007, basically in May this year, allowed Pakistan to resurface on the global map and brought it at par with India. And this is what Pakistan had been missing. And I think this was one wonderful opportunity for Pakistan to navigate this complex environment. And I think right now, we have never seen such a bonhomie between Washington and Islamabad, just because the president in Washington thinks very well of the field marshal of Pakistani forces as well as of the government there. I'm not going into the details as to whether that's good or bad, but as far as Pakistan as a country is concerned, I think it has regained a lot of space it had lost to Washington, to pro-India lobbies within the United States. And I think largely, if you look at it from distance, it has been a successful journey ever since Donald Trump returned to the White House.
Thank you. So, I mean, if we're looking at geopolitics, I mean, it's not only an academic discipline, it's also a pragmatic practice, which is quite often overlooked. So not only is it a means to interpret events, trends, and processes in the international arena, it is also that means with which to formulate policy. And something which is quite often overlooked is that even though the formulation of the policy is towards managing and regulating the flows and relations of power and influence, of course, this needs to be somehow justified and legitimized. And this, I mean, you got different speech acts, different historical uses of historical memory and mythology to justify what is happening. So, Christoph, so when we're looking at Poland, as you earlier mentioned today, is the shortest route between Berlin and Moscow, which is not a very enviable geographic position to be in. But there is also a very complicated, not only contemporary issue, but historical one, because if we go back long enough, of course, beginning of the 17th century, it was Poland at Moscow's gates, when Poland was an empire. And so there is this, one hand, this historical but also contemporary historical antagonism from this point onwards with Russia, but you have that tricky one with Germany, and also this complicated relationship with Ukraine, which on the one hand politically support, especially if we look at the geopolitical equation, that to support Ukraine is to cause problems for Russia. But also, by supporting Ukraine, there are issues such as the Welle massacre for some. So when you have this very, should we say, varied and at what looks contradictory kind of sets of historical facts, historical memory, and contemporary events, how does Poland navigate this politically on the domestic level and on the foreign level?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's very relevant. I'm here in independent Bangladesh. I'm from independent Poland. And both of our countries are united by this kind of feeling that independence is something important. And as we speak, Ukraine is fighting for its independence. Actually, it's the Ukrainian War of Independence. And it's something which basically is the first thing when we think about Ukraine today. And we do not see the Ukrainian conflict or the Russian aggression on Ukraine as a kind of regional conflict. But it's something which should be at the heart of many states who would like to remain independent. Because I would understand that this war is one of the first imperial wars of the 21st century. Many things have been said about this kind of, polar order. But historically, when we look at the history of mankind, this kind of setting, it was the setting when different empires had different poles of power, and I don't think it's beneficial for many independent states in Europe and beyond. And answering your question, and I think that that's a crucial thing. If we have 7 neighbors, Poland, Czech Republic, Lithuania, Germany, Slovakia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. And I think that was a success, the beginning success of our story, of our 35 years of continued development and growth, was because we were able to mend our relationship with many neighbors, with Germany, with the Czech Republic, with Lithuania, with Ukraine. And that was the kind of process of reconciliation is a very important foundation for peace. Not only between states, because that's my argument. We don't need to have only this peace between states, but we need to have peace between societies. And you need to have the reconciliation after the conflict, and you need to have the institutions of reconciliation. In our Polish-German example, it's, for example, the youth exchange program. Like every year, more than 200,000 people from Poland and Germany would work together, or study together. You have bilateral institutions, and I think it's crucial to maintaining peace and maintaining cooperation. But before we have this kind of reconciliation, we need to have just peace. And by just peace, I understand the situation when both parties in the conflict can, after the conflict, remain sovereign states and can be take decisions on their own. If the premises of the peace are wrong, you will not have a lasting peace, even if you call this kind of solution a peace plan or something like this. So we need to have just peace as a precondition for this development and reconciliation. But we also need the third thing, and I would wrap up with this. We need to have, most unfortunately, credible deterrence as independent states, and also in Europe. And that's something we need to invest in. And that's I think that's something which, in the Global South, you basically were so kind to mention this states. And if we invest our money and our resources in deterrence and in defense, we don't have so much resources to invest, for example, in developmental cooperation, humanitarian need, and other very important, let's say, global commons. So I think we need to understand that the very basic of what the state needs to provide to its citizens is the security. And because of the aggression in Eastern Europe, we don't feel secure anymore in Europe. So we need to invest more in our defense and in our deterrence. And I think that's something we would like to cooperate more. We would like to invest more in our relationship with the countries of Global South. But for the foreseeable future, we will need to invest more in our defense in the expense of other projects. And I think that's the thing, this very sad thing about the war you mentioned. It's not only local conflict, but it's local, but it has global implications for everybody as we sit here.
Okay, so just hold on to that one for the next round.
Okay, not easy, but
Keep it. So now we have the issue that if we look at how wars are communicated globally, it seems that if we look at the global north, how it communicates wars, that you have all wars, and to use the Animal Farm expression, all wars are equal, but some are more equal than others. So if we look at Ukraine, this is a war that is more equal than others for the global north. But if we're looking at the global south, you have other conflicts, and especially if we're looking at the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is a big thing which is, for the most part, ignored or downplayed in the mainstream media of the global north. And you have different geopolitical, political, all kinds of different reasons for this. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of the global south, they see Ukraine. This is a war. It's a European war. It's about realism, hard power, who's the top dog. But when they see Gaza, where you have an absolutely unequal use of force and military power from a state actor which is directed against civilians as a collective punishment, there is no, for example, condemnation. You even have an International Court of Justice. This is a plausible genocide. But Netanyahu can visit the US Houses of Parliament and he gets a standing ovation. And this creates some dissonance when you get outside of this bubble, where this is also seen as a European war against the Muslim world, against the Arab world. And I would like to ask Naveen the question. I mean, you have these unequal perceptions of war. I mean, if you're looking at these wars from the global south perspective, I mean, how does how would you say the representation of the Ukraine conflict versus how they represent the Gaza conflict, what things create this cognitive dissonance, and which things resonate and do not resonate with the daily lives of people in the global south who see one war as being more militarily equal and another one which is absolutely unequal in terms of military power? Thank you.
I think you're absolutely right that from the global south, this inequality is very palpable, that this is exactly, I think you've correctly identified the contradictions, the perceptions, and how there is this sense of global outrage in the case of Ukraine, but not in the case of Gaza. And I think in terms of thinking about why there is this discrepancy, because there are two things. One, the perception problem. The other is, why is there this kind of discrepancy in the first place? What is it that certain actors are able to do? And why is it that the West is sometimes complicit in genocide and it pretends to not see others, whereas in some instances, they speak in a righteous fashion. And I think Ukraine is that war where they want to take the righteous position, right? To say that they're on the side of peace, on the side of stability and so on. But I think, this conversation that we are having in part offers an explanation, which is how, even in our conversations surrounding peace, we talk about defense, we talk about arming ourselves even more in order to secure ourselves, right? That it creates the security dilemma that it probably would is something that we know theoretically, we know that empirically, we know that in trying to be more safe, we actually make ourselves significantly more unsafe. We know this, and yet we arm ourselves up to our teeth, right? So there's that kind of a structural feature. There are other structural elements here too, that we've moved away from a world when we were thinking more about wars in terms of great power wars, right? And right now, that's not the world we are in. Greg, you spoke of hegemonic stability, right? But what we see now is that those who are in a position of more power, the superpowers of the world, are the biggest perpetrators of human rights violations around the world too. They are the ones who are complicit in genocide. They are the ones who arm genocide. And in thinking about the sort of global security threat that they create, it effectively counters any idea that hegemonic stability would have about a world where hegemons actually do create peace and stability. Because what we have seen is United States that actually creates death and destruction all over the world. It hasn't really done much else in terms of peace and security. The reason why everyone wants to be on the side of the United States is so that they can save themselves a bout of death and destruction, right? And so maintaining good relations with the United States, despite its behavior as an aggressive entity, is something that becomes beneficial. I mean, if any other country behaved in the way that the United States did, I don't think there would be this kind of silence, right? Or this kind of pandering to it that we feel, especially in thinking about the global south, countries in the global south, that there is a sense that you still need to be in good relations with the United States, speaks to the fear factor that's involved in maintaining this, because otherwise we don't really know what might happen. You know, we've heard about how the U.S. In Pakistan contributed to regime change. There are a lot of people who think that a similar thing has happened here in Bangladesh also. We have seen the United States play this role in Latin America, all over the world actually, right? And that is what people point to when you bring this up in terms of the US being some kind of an arbiter of peace and security in the greater world. And I think what does connect all of these interests is the fact that now, if we are sort of thinking about international politics structurally, we are no longer in a world of just thinking about great powers, but we're having to contend with global capitalism. And with supply chain economics and politics, we are in a significantly more integrated world, which means we do have a certain kind of reliance. In the 60s and 70s, we used to talk about dependent development. Right now, a lot of people say that, oh, no, that doesn't really happen that way because, you know, we have all these segmented markets now. Markets are able to operate independently, and yet development actually is quite dependent on markets abroad. The US forms a massive market for many countries in the global south, which again creates another impetus for maintaining good relations. And it's in this context that I think, you know, the conversation we're having here about China as an emerging power becomes really useful, because I think this is the time, in the context of you know, the tariffs that President Trump has put forward, and the way in which it fashions China as an emerging threat. There are all kinds of ways in which countries are thinking about how to bypass the United States in terms of the economic relationship that they have. Will there be other ways in which markets can be developed outside of the United States? Is there a world where the United States isn't as relevant as it is? And, you know, we realize that in trying to think through these, or, you know, when the United States sort of thinks about how to manage China, when it creates alliances on the basis of managing China, for example, Quad and so on, you know, that also introduces another level of aggression in the world system, that it creates a kind of conflictual vibe into the international system, which again makes for a fairly more insecure world, right? So the current situation, I would say, is one where we have discontent as something that's durable, as something that's persistent, and made complicated by the military-industrial complex, made complicated by how security and economic interests align together, and how in all of this, there has been, you know, easy complicity in democratic backsliding, that we've seen democracy under threat all across the world. And because we are contending with such spectacular violence in this present moment, that we've been willing to look the other way when that happens. So again, coming back to how this all informs countries in the global south, I think all of this is information for those who are trying to think about world politics today, knowing right now, because right now there's, the United States doesn't even hide anymore how racist their policies and politics are, right? Now that they don't hide it, now countries in the global south don't have to really beat around the bush anymore either. They are now quite openly thinking about how to imagine a different world where peace might have some chance. Like you were talking about just peace. We need to sort of think about things like not just peace, but also about justice and about just justice and restorative justice and what that might look like. And I think in this moment, these are this is the impetus coming from the global south.
Okay, thank you. So we will just move into a quick round, 1 to 2 minutes maximum, so we can get a short bit of Q&A from the audience, but 1 to 2 minutes from each speaker, the reflections on this. And I know Carolina was already ready earlier, so please, Carolina.
Thanks. Well, I think everything is interconnected, what has been said here. You talking about global versus local. I think that's something that we can see on a micro level. We all see what's happening in different countries, Western countries also around the world, voters going more for the extreme parties, for the populists. And one of the reasons for that is because a lot of people feel left behind after and during globalization. And what we are seeing on a national level, like in this far-right or far-left parties, we are also seeing this on a macro level, seeing the global south also protesting in their own way against the West by, for example, not supporting a war in Ukraine or not seeing it as the same party. And in this shifting moment we're in, it's very difficult to think in the same patterns we're used to think about peace, about a peace agreement, about societies coming together. I think this is something that we have to rethink in a new creative way, because obviously the old way of looking at wars and looking at peace agreements, it hasn't worked. And it will not if we don't start thinking about that in a different way.
Thank you. Anyone want to jump in with their reflections? 1 to 2 minutes?
Do you want to? No? I concur with other panelists. The Western love for democracy, for human rights, I think got exposed, particularly what happened in Gaza, the genocide of the Palestinians. So thereafter, I think all the sheen that there was on this human rights advocacy for democracy, the rule of law, I think that is gone. Everybody now, all those who have abetted Israel, who supported directly or indirectly, they stand naked. And this has brought about a new dynamic, injected a new dynamic in global politics. And you are right when you say that now the global south, or the countries in the global south, don't really have to bother about all this kind of reprieve that they have been getting from the West. We saw, how all of a sudden the Western media went quiet over the so-called persecution that had been going on in the Chinese Western Xinjiang province. Before the Palestinians Israelis started killing the Palestinians, there was almost every day in one of the mainstream medias these reports about persecution in Xinjiang. But post-October 2023, we hardly found any reports, just because the the West lost this locus standi in this entire discourse. You know, they lost the credentials for democracy. So I think this is, in a way, the Israelis did the world something good. It brought an end to the exceptionalism that the US and other Western countries had been deploying when dealing with countries like Pakistan, like Bangladesh. As I think you were saying, I'll conclude with that had another country in the global south indulged in the kind of genocide that Palestinians endured, the hell would have broken loose in the West. But there was a single word. Of course, there were a lot of demonstrations, protests within the West, and the Spaniards, I think, took the lead, people in Portugal, in Spain, many other countries. But as a whole, the governments worked as in unison, the major lead governments, and that way I think it's a good opportunity for the countries of the global south to chart a different path for themselves. Thank you.
If I may?
Christine, please.
Yeah. So first of all, I really want to thank you for continuing to say genocide in Gaza. It's not clear that everyone else would. So thank you. As an American, who I've been very critical of Israel going back to my early adulthood, I have seen, as a consequence of Israel's genocide in Gaza, enormous sea shift in American public opinion about Israel. Something that I never thought was going to be possible. I'm actually seeing it. That you would have a candidate like Mamdani that would run openly critical of Israel, I think has opened up a new space for politics for those Democrats that are paying attention and want to learn. This is a sea shift. Now, unfortunately, because of the enormous influence of AIPAC on our political system, I don't think that American public opinion is going to, changes in American public opinion is going to change in American public policy. But I agree with everything that's been said. When Israel does it, there's no criticism. But when Russia does it, all hell breaks loose. And the complete exposure of not only of American hypocrisy, I mean, the Germans have been horrible. The Britons have arrested people, elderly people who are protesting for Palestinian rights. It has just really shown the complete impoverishment of the West when it comes to Israel. But I also will say, as an educator, for much of this panel has been out of my wheelhouse, this is a terrible time to be an educator. One of the most terrifying things in the classroom, my views on Palestine are well known, is if a student accuses me of being an anti-Semite. It has had an unbearably chilling effect on the classroom, on the discussions that you can have, the honesty with which you can have conversations. I was recently teaching the genocide of Bangladeshis in my class, and I threw up a series of definitions of genocide that different organizations offer. And even as I was saying it, my worst fear was that someone was going to accuse me of shadow teaching on Israel. So I really just want to thank everyone for dilating upon this issue. I think it's really critical. There's no solution. Israel's going to get away with what it's doing. In 10 years, there might not be a Palestinian question to even debate. But I do want to thank everyone for dilating upon it. Thank you.
Yeah. May I just jump in, because I think it's very relevant points have been touched upon. But I think, the danger of playing Gaza war against the Ukraine war is that we just would play one strategy against another. And that I don't think that's the way forward, to be honest. I think, in the contemporary world, we have three points of gravity. We have Eastern Europe with Ukraine, we have Middle East, and we have Taiwan. And I think it's crucial that we do everything possible that all three centers of gravity would remain peaceful. And I think that's our responsibility. And as you know, from my perspective on Gaza, of course it was a very brutal action, but we need to also remember what was the start of this war.
The occupation is the start of the war.
It was the terrorist attack. Yeah?
No, the occupation is the start of the war.
It does not justify. Let me finish. It was not this attack has not, this genocide, as you say, is, we should also understand that, that Israel has the right to existence. And we, for example, practically every country in the European Union support both state solutions, that we need to create a safe space for Palestinians, but also we need to ensure that Israel has the right to exist there as it existed for 80 years.
Well, you do know that that's become dog whispering vocabulary, right? The vocabulary that says that Israel has the right to exist is really the justification of genocide. I'm sure at this point you know that.
No, it's not the justification for genocide.
It is being used, I think, largely.
I mean, you have to
justify
read the
what the Israelis have done.
It's one of the interpretations. I think that's the.
And this is why we need democracy.
Let us look how the peace or the ceasefire came to its existence. Yeah, when the Western countries and also the leading countries of the Muslim world came together in Egypt. We need to work together to achieve at least a ceasefire. The ceasefire would not have been possible.
Cost? At the
ceasefire
cost
has
of
meant
statehood?
you seize, we fire. That's what it has meant.
I will just round it up here a little bit. I think what this displays is the problem of representation and perception, because, I mean, you're seeing things from different angles, you got your different things. I would add, I mean, of course, anti-Semitism is meant to kill any kind of criticism. And I think that it ignores the fact by causing a genocide against Palestinians is the ultimate expression of anti-Semitism, as Palestinians are Semites. So after this, do we have time for one or two questions from the organisers? If you go to the speaker, please identify who you are, where you're from, and concise question.
Thank you so much. My name is Shafiullah, I'm a former ambassador and associated with the Center for Governing Studies. You have been discussing war never ends and the ceasefire is just an occasion to rearm again. The question is how you end war, because 5 security members of the United Nations, there be arms manufacturer, supplier, and they are the merchant of death. So when the power like that are selling weapons and arms in the world, how you expect the war will end? It's a both several $7 trillion business in the world, the war manufacturer. So they manufacture war, they stop in one side and then begin in another side because they have that industry have to run. So it is academic discussion. Thank you so much. It will continue so long you can impose armed disarmament. If it is possible to have armed disarmament, what was discussed many years in the United Nations, they could not do it because the 5-member Security Council, they don't want it. They want to continue with the war, and they create war because they are the manufacturer of the human death. They are the death merchant, I should say. Thank you so much.
So could the next please go to the microphone? Who are you, and So at the back, first.
Thank you. My name is Tanvir. I teach international relations at Dhaka University. So I'll have two very brief academic questions to the panel. One is specifically to Professor Christine Fair and another to the entire panel. The first question is, if perpetual wars or the protracted wars that we see fail to come to any negotiated long-term solutions, and victor's peace remain the only option for belligerents to begin with, do you foresee future conflicts to be much larger in terms of scale and intensity of violence, because belligerents would ultimately see decisive and complete victory over their opponents as the only way to any lasting solutions? So that is to Professor Christine Fair. Second question is to the entire panel, and whoever wants to join in is fine. So for any protracted conflict to last, you also need protected narratives that are diametrically opposed to each other. In today's world, with almost no reference object for objectivity and a market push for disinformation, how do you end up tackling those narratives? Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm going to focus on the India-Pakistan conflict because that's the most obvious one about which I think you're referring. The fundamental problem is that India cannot impose its will upon Pakistan. It can't impose a decisive defeat upon Pakistan. And Pakistan, for its part, is sassy enough to keep mounting challenges to India. So I don't see longer wars. What I see is there's never going to be a resolution of the Kashmir issue. For one reason is the Pakistani military itself is a big spoiler. If there were to be peace with India, it would be much more difficult for the Pakistan army to run the country in the way in which it does. So whenever there have been marches towards that, and I would say even with Musharraf's effort in 2004, the fact is the core commanders weren't behind him. So nuclear weapons are also a really important player here because they ensure that these conflicts actually don't last longer than a few weeks. We saw this during Kargil, we saw this in Operation Sindoor. Things escalated very, very quickly. Both sides are looking for an off-ramp. So I actually don't see these kinds of wars. What I actually see are these very highly tense crisis slides. But because of the presence of nuclear weapons, things escalate very quickly, but then both sides are very rapidly looking for an off-ramp going through bilateral channels, but also through multilateral channels.
And who wants to address the second question briefly?
What was that?
I don't remember.
I can go. I think I'll steal from the ambassador's words and reinforce disarmament. Right? Because I think you're absolutely right. In this age, you cannot fight disinformation so easily. We live in a polarized world. What's problematic in this polarized world is that your views now come with guns and weapons and arms. And so it's whoever has more money, whoever has more arms, they win these battles, right? Disarmament will make the world a safer, more peaceful place.
And so for the very last question, thank you for patiently waiting. Please.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anjum Shahriar, master's student at Department of Government and Politics of Jahangirnagar University. My question is to Mr. Imtiaz Gul. Recently, we have seen Pakistan promoting Mr. Asim Munir to Field Marshal, the post of Field Marshal, which is, I think, the right next after Ayub Khan. And they have also created a new constitutional post, Chief of Defense, where he is given lifetime immunity. So when a nation is creating such extraordinarily powerful military post, and basically it can be seen that they are prioritizing military authority over the civilian governments. So with that structure, can a nation like that move towards peace, as we were discussing peace and wars? And another question to Ms. Christina. So as we are discussing the Israel and Palestinian conflict, and I think one of the interesting perspectives that I have seen in the public support of after the Gaza genocide, I think the increasing public support for Gaza in American society. And what is interesting to see that even from the Republican side, we are seeing that very influential figures like Tucker Carlson and others supporting the Palestinian cause. So with this change in shift in public support, do you think any policy change we can see in the recent future? Thank you.
Okay, so may I? Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Yes, I think we have seen in recent weeks a further empowerment of Pakistan's military security apparatus. You can call it backsliding on democratic rights or internal empowerment of the armed forces. But whether peace depends on that, that is questionable, because in the world there are examples when there have been generals in power, but they brought about peace. I think the primary prerequisite for peace is, number one, trust between the two parties. And then what Christine also said, the Kashmir conflict. As for India, Pakistan is concerned, I think unless the Kashmir dispute is set to rest, unless it is addressed in a comprehensive, permanent way, the chances of peace, permanent peace, will remain grim. And since this was about the ceasefires and conflict, what is the correlationship? Similarly, our relationship with Afghanistan is also far away from peace because of this border issue. There are certain lobbies within Afghanistan which continue peddling the issue of border, calling it as an unfinished agenda. But they forget that, this geographical boundary that Pakistan is basically came into existence and also got international recognition the moment Pakistan was admitted to the United Nations. That is what creates a friction, triggers, this discussion on the Durand line. They call it the Durand line, we call it internationally recognized border. And the same issue, the same is the case with India. Unless we find a permanent solution to the line of control that divides the Kashmirs under the respective controls, it will be very difficult to think of peace. And in the end, it will depend on the intent as well as to how long does India want to stay in this state of perennial conflict with Pakistan, because Pakistan being an ally of China. So this is a very complicated situation. However, prerequisite is the resolution of Kashmir conflict this way or that way. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've abused sufficiently the time limit to a severe enough degree. So I would like to for you to join me in thanking this panel for a very lively discussion, debate on this very crucial issue. So thank you.